This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's February 20th, 2025. On this day in 1472, Scotland got a little bigger as a result of a royal marriage. For the 600 years prior to that, the island groups of Shetland and Orkney were Norwegian. The Norse Vikings had moved there in the 8th and 9th centuries, and even though that culture and kind of governing changed, the people who became known as Norwegians kept their hold on the nearly 200 small items between that nation's mainland and the British Isles. But in the late 15th century, Scandinavia was in bad shape. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden were all ruled by one king, and he was hurting for money. So when King Christian I married his daughter Margaret off to the Scottish king, he couldn't pay her dowry. Christian essentially offered the two island groups as collateral while promising to pay the Scottish king cash whenever he got a chance. But much like so many people who dropped their most precious items at a pawn shop with full intention of buying them back, King Christian could not make good on his promise. And so the island chains became the northernmost part of Scotland and remain so to this day. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee and some historical context for the news from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. History is full of stories explaining why territory changes hands. A surprising number of them are colorful and unexpected, like that king pawning off land so his daughter could marry a neighboring monarch. But others are just straightforward power moves to gain military footholds or access to natural resources. In fact, this is also the anniversary of one of those. American Samoa officially became the southernmost U.S. territory on this date in 1929, after a few decades of working to get the various local leaders to cede control, all so that our nation could have a naval base there. When the President of the United States starts talking about adding to the nation's territory, it can sound impossible. Greenland, Panama, Gaza, Canada as the 51st state. How seriously do you take it when President Trump brings up any of those talking points now? But imagine telling an American in the early 19th century that one day there would be a place far in the South Pacific where people are born American citizens and our country operates a substantial military facility. It would have sounded to them like a strange kind of fairy tale. Honestly, Hawaiian or even Alaskan statehood probably would have sounded far-fetched to them too. And yet, it's the way things are now. Because borders and concepts of territorial control are human constructs. They're based on agreements and power structures, and those kinds of things are always in flux. Just look at our own state. For the first few years of Tennessee's statehood, everything south of the Duck River was Cherokee territory, off limits to white settlement. Battles and treaties, federal laws, and intimidation moved those borders bit by bit, change by change. But wanting that kind of change isn't the same as getting it, as we have seen here in Tennessee. You see, the border between Tennessee and Georgia was supposed to follow the 35th parallel, but when surveyors initially staked out the line, some mistakes were made. In the area around Chattanooga, the state line runs about a mile south of where the initial territorial agreements agreed it should be. The way things ended up, Georgia has no access to the Tennessee River. But the river does dip slightly below the 35th parallel. So theoretically, a tiny sliver of the river should have been theirs. And when a series of dry summers required water use restrictions in the area around Atlanta, Georgia legislators started eyeing that major river full of water that they could really use. In 2008, state legislators in Georgia started talking about fixing the border between our states. They argue that the state line was the parallel, no matter how the land in that mile had been used for more than 200 years. I love the quote from then Georgia Senator David Schaefer, who said, "It cannot be changed by a mathematician with a faulty compass or a surveying party afraid of the Indians." The response here in Tennessee was to point to our state code, which specifies that the boundary is the line as it was surveyed. It even names the guy who did the job, James Carmack, and notes that he was hired by the state of Georgia. It turned into a whole thing. The more it became clear that Georgia was really quite serious about securing access to that land, and more importantly, to the river, Tennessee lawmakers dug their heels in. A representative from Nashville, Gary Odom, said this state needed to take a stand against the, in his words, shenanigans to the south. And some officials offered shenanigans of their own in return. At one point, the mayor of Chattanooga accompanied a truckload of water down to the Georgia State House and handed the bottles to that state's legislators while wearing a coonskin cap, Davy Crockett style. Nothing came of that Georgia land grab, but the idea did resurface again in 2013 and in 2019. There was never any definitive resolution, just situations where the folks in Georgia lost their momentum and moved on. So it's very possible they could make another go of it at some point. In just a few minutes, the Afro-Appalachian folk of WNXP's Nashville Artist of the Month. That's coming up after the newscast.
At WPLN, we tell stories about honoring our families.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away.
And preserving memories.
I never heard of a Rosenwald School. Nobody's never told me that's where I went.
I'm Char Daston, and my reporting connects you with your neighbors and the important moments in their lives.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. For yesterday's snowstorm, forecasters were pretty much spot on. Snow totals range from an inch to about 4 inches across Middle Tennessee. The region did not experience some of the extremes that were predicted, leaving locals with a slow-paced snow day. Christine Grossbeck took a stroller walk in a park with her 4-month-old infant boy, who needs that motion to nap.
I enjoy a little snow here and there. I am ready for spring, but we don't get that many snow days around here, so I like it.
Meanwhile, Claire and Stephen Abernathy say they embrace hangouts with neighbors and venturing out with their dog, Sage.
We like to drive around and see all the snow, but we also will probably stop at a few other places to play with Sage in the snow. And usually we have a fire pit in our front yard going.
Yeah, we usually end the day with a fire, so in the front yard, and all the neighbors come over.
The weather system caused most schools and government offices to close in many counties. The reopening is happening at varying speeds around the region. In Nashville, most metro offices will reopen this morning, although MNPS classes are still canceled. Administrators at the Y-12 nuclear facility in Oak Ridge are scrambling to rehire hundreds of employees who received layoff notices last week. Their positions were briefly terminated in the sweeping cutbacks orchestrated by Elon Musk. The Knoxville News Sentinel reports his Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, reversed course after realizing they had not understood what the workers did, or that nuclear weapons are handled by the Energy Department rather than the Department of Defense. The Y-12 complex dates to the World War II Manhattan Project that developed the world's first atomic bomb. These days, roughly 8,500 workers at Y-12 process, upgrade, and modernize the uranium and lithium components of nuclear weapons. 2 Nashville 12-year-olds are facing charges of threatening mass violence due to social media posts that referred to, quote, shooting up their school. The posts included at least one photo showing one of the children with what appeared to be an AK-47. Metro Nashville police say they found that item during a search of the child's home. It turned out to be a very realistic toy gun. However, the officers also found multiple unsecured weapons in the home. Nashville's Metro Council is requesting that the police department review the safety plans for all of its public schools. The resolution that was approved this week asks Metro Police to conduct evaluations at every public school in Nashville and then provide recommendations for how to make them safer. It also asks the school district to outline how it will adopt the recommendations. There were opponents to the bill. Several council members pointed out that the primary cause of gun violence is guns, which they say is not addressed by this proposal. But Councilmember Courtney Johnston, who sponsored the resolution, countered that this is exactly what the council is powered to do. There was also criticism that the resolution implies that law enforcement and the school district do not already conduct extensive safety evaluations. MNPS is in the process of implementing a new weapon detection system in most of its high schools. That move comes after a shooting at Antioch High School last month, where a student opened fire, killing a 16-year-old and himself. Percy Priest Elementary has been recognized as a grief-sensitive school. It's the first school in Middle Tennessee to receive that distinction. A counselor at Percy Priest founded Good Grieve Nashville. She helped the elementary school be recognized as a grief-sensitive school by the New York Life Foundation. It supports bereavement and social justice programs for young people. This designation allows the school staff to undergo yearly grief training, and a one-time grant of $500 will be used to create Heart's Garden, a place where students and staff can decorate rocks in memory of their loved ones. Tennessee State University is planning to cut scholarships and staff positions to help with the university's financial straits. The state has underfunded the historically black university by nearly $2 billion, according to a federal estimate. And the governor's budget proposal did not include money to help. Instead, TSU's President Dwayne Tucker presented a 5-year plan to the state's Republican leadership yesterday. It would save $13 million at the expense of personnel and the number of scholarships offered to the next 5 freshman classes. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. When Tennessee-based artist Mon Rovîa first started making music, it sounded like this. That 2021 record didn't quite connect the way he'd hoped, and he almost gave up making music entirely. Then he stripped it all back and started posting videos to TikTok with just his voice and ukulele. That sound, along with meditative melodies and spiritually inquisitive and often uplifting lyrics, spoke to fans and big-time influencers alike. It led to songs like To Watch the World Spin Without You, being used in thousands of videos.
And if you're stuck watching TV, wishing you were not, 'cause everything that you're feeling, wish you forgot.
Now, 4 EP releases later, Mon Rovîa's songs have reached millions, and he's in the middle of a sold-out tour. In between shows, he caught up with WNXP's Jason Moon Wilkins for an in-depth conversation about his past as a Liberian refugee, the spiritual foundation of his lyrics, and the development of what he calls Afro-Appalachian folk. They also talked about influences beyond music, helping Mon Rovîa meet this turbulent time.
You gave us a handpicked playlist for this Artist of the Month program, and in your description, you said that it might surprise people you don't listen to a ton of music, but a lot of your inspiration comes from what you read. But you left us hanging there, not telling us like what you've been reading. So is there something, even in the last year or two, that you've read that you've been like, oh, that has directly inspired your music?
I would say a lot of James Baldwin's writings. I mean, I'm currently reading a lot of his different essays and things. But it's actually a lot going into the civil rights era too. Like I'm reading like a Miriam Baraka book about the different layers of Dante's Inferno, and he's basically talking about this experience of the black experience and puts it in these different layers, playing on the themes of Dante's Inferno. And I don't know, I really am getting into trying to understand a lot of their process, how they fought social injustice, and how the mirroring of that time and those times is still now. Yeah. And so what can we take from there to speak into now, I think is super important. So I'm just trying to really understand it. So
I've been thinking about this same topic a lot lately, because when you look at particularly turbulent times, a lot of times the music rises to meet it. And late 60s soul music, 70s punk, the conscious hip hop of the late 80s, early 90s. And it obviously has been on your mind. How do you see the role of an artist, a songwriter, in a time like this?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to accept, at times being loved by many and at times being on the outside and scrutinized. I think as an artist, truth has to be the epicenter. And so for at least my writings, whatever I talk about, I have to know that what I'm doing is hopefully, it won't bring everybody along, but you have to be okay to bring some and be happy with those that do see the truth of the matter and accept that. I don't think you can clearly bring everybody into this awakening, but the truth is there is a big conscious revival going on around the world right now in many countries, and that's why there's so much unrest, and so many people, the people just don't want to be in a daze anymore. They're trying to, they're seeing the webs that have been spun, for the first times in many places, and are willing to use their voices to untangle those things. So the artist, this is the most important time for an artist to be able to use their voice and just not be afraid of maybe the consequences that could happen. You won't be loved all the time, and that's something that is hopefully you can find something deeper to push you, because the love of the people all the time is never going to satisfy, and so hopefully the music can carry you through.
Mon Rovîa is WNXP's Nashville Artist of the Month. Check out WNXP.org throughout February for this full conversation, a hand-picked playlist, and a sonic cathedral performance. And we do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.